Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wayne Anderson, and I am the President-elect of the Hispanic Public Relations Association, Miami chapter. My board members and I are delighted to welcome you to our virtual panel on AI chatbots and VR and how these technologies disrupt our lives while revolutionizing the human experience. HPRA is a non-profit organization dedicated to advancing the practice of public relations among Hispanic professionals. Our mission is to serve as a voice for Hispanic communications professionals nationwide and to empower our members through support, resources, education, and guidance. We are excited to have assembled a panel of private, business, and academic experts to share their insights on AI, chatbots, and VR. These panelists will discuss the latest trends in these technologies, how they are being used to improve our lives, and their impact on the communications and PR space. 2 years ago, our understanding of AI was very different than it is today. We are now beginning to understand the true potential of AI and how it can be used to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. However, we also need to be aware of the ethical implications of AI and its potential for misuse. Thank you for joining us for this informative and thought-provoking panel discussion. And now, I would like to introduce our moderator, Cynthia Hudson, the Managing Director of CNN in Espanol.
So much, Wayne, and I don't know if anyone noticed, but that video itself was actually a clone. It was a clone of Wayne Anderson, using the cloned voice and a photo. And so I think it's so fitting to start our incredible panel today. And I want to thank all of you who have joined LinkedIn and who are with us to share your insights. Those of us on the panel are so excited. I'm moderating this group of experts. And these are people who are intrinsically involved in the creation and the future and the use of AI and ChatGPT. And those, as we know, are incredible tools that will revolutionize the human experience. Now, we will be accepting questions at the end of the session, so please feel free to send them along in the chat, and we will get to them as we get closer to the end. But I want to introduce our incredible panel today, and I do want to say that I thank the Hispanic Public Relations Association for this invitation. Today we have Dr. Donna Davis. She is the Director of Strategic Communications Master's Program at the University of Oregon. We have Dara Levarjan, who is the CEO and co-founder of Delphi. It's a digital cloning platform, and I believe he might have had something to do with cloning and creating the Wayno instead of Wayne. And then, of course, we have with us our friend Rudy Sarmiento of GitHub, which is a Microsoft company, and he is the Senior Customer Success Architect and a software engineer. And frankly, Rudy, I love your title. To be somebody whose title means success is just fantastic. So I want to start by just getting a little bit from each of you. And I'll start with Dr. Davis. Can you tell us give us just a brief overview of the history of AI, chatbots, and VR?
Certainly, happy to do that. It's always interesting to me that when I talk about AI, especially in a session such as this, that when I say, oh, we've all been using AI for years now, people get kind of defensive and go, why do you assume I know what AI is? I've never used it. And my answer is, so you don't use Siri, and you don't use Alexa, and you don't use any of the tools and map tools that are in your car that tell you where to go. You know, think about all of these things that are in our everyday lives already, and that have been embedded in our lives already. AI actually officially was launched in 1956 from a project at Dartmouth. So when you think of it that way, it's almost 75 years. And yet, where we don't think about it being in our everyday lives, when Microsoft launched ChatGPT, in their first 2 months, they reached 100 million users. 100 million users. So adoption, as we think about adoption of technology, that was enormous, and actually was the fastest adoption level of any technology at that point. I think Meta's Threads might have just beat that, but it shows you how much it's ubiquitous. It's in our everyday lives. Similarly, people think of VR as something that's really new. And I've been working in virtual worlds for almost 16 years. So there have been virtual worlds and video games and things like that that were the precursors to what we think about as VR today. And even as you think about, I have a VR headset, on my desk that is the most contemporary, but VR headsets were first invented in 1968 with the Sword of Damocles, is what he called it, and the first head-mounted display. So again, they've been around for a long time, but they've just really entered this level of mass adoption in the way we use it every day in very recent time, in the last couple of years, or even in the last few months.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. And Dara, can you tell us a little bit about some of the ways that AI or chatbots and VR are actually disrupting everyday lives?
Yeah, so as a trained engineer, what used to take me days to build now takes me hours. And I don't think that's just in engineering. The time it takes from idea to implementation is now a fraction of what it used to take. So if you have an idea, you can talk to AI, talk to a chatbot, learn all the things that you didn't know before, and build that thing and test it. So I think that's going to enable just a lot of entrepreneurs to try ideas that maybe before they didn't have the knowledge to try. And the second thing that I think it's clearly disrupting is how young people think about their education. Back when I was in college, the most common skill set that people strive to learn was Excel or PowerPoint or coding. But funnily enough, I think those are the skills that are in risk of being like 90% automated. So I think the way children are thinking about what they want to do when they're older is definitely changing.
Fascinating. I find all of this to be just so incredibly interesting. I think our panel and our guests who are watching also feel the same way. We have quite a number of you. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to go to Rudy. Rudy, what are some of the potential benefits and risks of the AI chatbots and the VR?
Yeah, I'll answer your question. Before I get to, I wanted to add a little something to what Donna said about adoption. In my role, I get to work with some of the largest companies in the US, Canada, and Latin America. And the level of adoption and the speed as to we've gotten to where we are, it has been impressive. Usually, even companies that usually will kind of take a back seat and wait for things to play out before they adopt it into their business, they're jumping right in and they want to get in there. They want to do more. They want more features. They want to use it because they're seeing, I believe, because they're seeing the productivity gains, like Dara mentioned, and the value of these products. Now, to answer your question on benefits and risks, let me start with the risks. There's a lot of people in the field that kind of paint like doomsday scenarios, elimination of humanity and all this. I kind of like the Terminator, Skynet fears from, that's kind of like sci-fi movies in my opinion. I think we're a little bit far away from that, especially with the current breed of AI, which is just generative AI. It's not AGI, which is like artificial general intelligence. That's where I think that becomes more of a threat or a risk. I think at the top of a lot of people's mind is the elimination of jobs, the impact it'll have on the job market. Goldman Sachs did a study, and they estimated that as many as 300 million worldwide jobs could be automated and replaced by AI. I think we're a little bit far away from that right now. I think in the near future, to Dara's point as well, is I don't think so much right now we should worry about our jobs being replaced by an AI, but definitely being replaced by somebody who knows AI and who knows how to use AI as a tool to make themselves more productive, go faster, innovate faster, etc. The benefits are many. I mean, at the speed that these AI systems can consume and take massive amounts of data and simplify it, we can come up with cures for diseases. Just like you may worry about someone using AI to create the next weapon, you can also use AI to prevent that weapon from being created and identify ways to prevent vulnerabilities and attacks and identify opportunities. As far as the job goes, the jobs threat that I mentioned, on the flip side of that coin, I think new industries will arise. I think new jobs will shift to different things, and we'll have more jobs that can need more creativity, and we're able to do more things as we get productive. OpenAI, as it is now, it's like a platform. When I say platform, think of the early days of the iPhone. And then when the App Store was introduced, that was the mobile revolution, and that introduced new industries. Think Uber. Uber would have never existed without this platform. I think there's a lot of opportunity for innovators and entrepreneurs to come up with new business and then create great new jobs. Dara is a perfect example of this. He has a startup that's early adopter of this technology, and he's using it to create his new business. Dara, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your company and what you do and how you've kind of taken the benefit side of AI to build something great.
Yeah, as Rudy said, with every technological revolution, there are jobs that are made irrelevant, but then a brand new set of jobs that we couldn't have fathomed existed then are created. So for Delphi, we're a digital cloning platform that lets people create a digital representation of themselves that other people can learn from and talk to. And we actually have customers who have hired people specifically for the job of creating and perfecting these clones. And we at Delphi even have a master of clone who helps us with the cloning architecture. And that role isn't a technical role. It's a combination of psychology, human understanding, linguistics. So there are different skill sets that are appearing to be more useful with AI. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with prompt engineering. That isn't really a technical skill set. It is more a language-based skill set. So I think language and linguistics is going to take off.
This is also fascinating. And speaking about language and linguistics, let's talk about communications, right? So Dr. Davis, many experts believe that all of this, the generative AI technologies, the ChatGPT, it's going to eliminate, as we just said, several jobs. I think Rudy very clearly, kind of enumerated some of those, as did Dara. I guess the other question that I have is, let's talk about those extraordinarily productive areas. We already know that law, medical, computer programming, but how is this technology going to help improve productivity in the communication space, particularly in public relations or journalism?
Yes, thank you. It's a great question. I think that there are, as a director of a master's program in strategic communication, and we're launching our new master's in immersive media communication, which are all things AR, VR, XR, AI, Web3, all of these technologies that are emerging. It's the first of its kind really focused on communication, because we've identified this overwhelming need to understand these technologies. People, as Rudy was saying, are jumping in, and where you see the headlines of, look at this new one and it's gone, and you look at this new tech and it's gone. The ups and downs of the adoption of these technologies have been pretty overwhelming. And often I say the failure to succeed was a failure to strategize. So understanding who your audiences are, understanding what they need, how to deliver it to them in a way that they want to consume it, understanding what the objectives are. And then once you get them there, how do you keep them there and keep their interest? So these are things that often get missed. It's like, let me just get it out there, build it, and they will come sort of mentality. So now we have communicators that are realizing, I've got to learn how to do these things. And I'm working on a study right now where we're interviewing people in the field specifically that have adopted AI and how they're using it, why they're using it, and to what effect. And some of the early findings that we're just starting to get are so fascinating to me, because we have leaders in the field who are talking about how they see jobs shifting in communication, because AI can help us be, as we heard both Dara and Rudy say, way more productive. So it might be that you use AI, give it an effective prompt to help you understand, I need to write a press release, or I need to write a speech, or I need to write all of the things that we do in PR that that AI can give you a starter. So it can give you, and I asked ChatGPT, who is Donna Z. Davis, PhD, and in 4 seconds, I had 4 paragraphs. And the first 3 were outstanding, except the 3rd paragraph said I wrote a book I have not written. Great title. I should probably write it. The 4th paragraph started with, sadly, in 2017, Dr. Davis died. Good. Last I checked, I still have a pulse. So I think that also is going to change the way we're thinking as communicators, that as we're adopting AI, it's going to create the jobs that it's going to really that will evolve are those that are really editors, proofreaders, fact checkers. That's going to be super critical to the use of AI. And prompt writers, as Dara was just talking about, prompt engineers. Writing an effective prompt is so important. Otherwise, if you think about search and how we might have used to type in a word or two and we'd get a mess of a result, now you can write a very detailed search prompt and get very specific answers. And I think those prompts are going to be super important. The other thing that's really going to change in communications jobs is that as some of that busy work, if you will, or the starter part where we can sometimes get stuck, becomes way more efficient, that the tactical things that we do in the field are going to be more likely done by AI, where the strategic things that we do in public relations specifically, and in journalism and communication, it's going to give us the opportunity to spend more time thinking strategically, planning strategically, and letting AI do some of that, if you will, busy work for us. It also is a wonderful tool to boost our creativity, to give us ideas, to help build out the things that we're trying to write, design, produce. And at the same time, one of the things I'm hearing over and over from the people that I'm interviewing is, do not use it to turn out press releases. Because at the end of the day, AI is not about relationships, where public relations is entirely about relationships. So it's that those relationships are going to be that much more important, that human-to-human contact, where you can use the AI to respond to the things that you know as a human, but the relationships are going to be super important. And what makes us different than other related fields like advertising and marketing is relationships have always been at the core of who we are and what we do. So
and it would probably allow us to have more time for building on those things.
Exactly.
And working on those things than on, hours and hours, perfecting a press release, which, it's going to require also questions about attribution and all of that stuff. So this is going to be a very interesting time. Okay, so I think you've helped us understand kind of what is that future in communications. Is there anything, if you could give a tip on, like, what are the things that you should include in your curriculum to prepare a student for this?
As we are building out new curriculum for our new master's program, last year I was teaching an ethics class, and I had my students develop an ethics policy for the use of AI in our program. So when do you use AI? We're seeing this already happening in high school, where high school kids have already figured out how to let AI write their papers for them, right? So that's already happening. We have to look at, how do we solve for that? How do we make sure that we're creating content and asking for them to produce content or results from our courses that really reflects that critical thinking piece, and that we have the opportunity to dig in and ask them, how'd you get there? So that you understand it came from them, not from AI. Right. And even thinking about, how do you provide attribution? When do you say, I used AI for this? Or use AI again as your starter, but then go in and look at what it said. Even in graduate school, one of the things we love to do, researchers, is one of the places you go in an academic article is the references. And you look at, where did all of this come from? And I think that's one of the things too, that it's going to be really important, that go ahead and do your first draft with AI, but then go in and find what was the source of that information and provide context that AI cannot do. Right. So it's looking at all of those things as ways to learn how to use it effectively, efficiently, and ethically. Those are the things we're trying to focus on.
Okay, so then as I hear you speak, I'm thinking of Dara and the company that he has created, his platform, Delphi, and the arrival of avatars, clone voices, deep fakes. I can tell you that in Mexico, there is a channel that runs news briefs with an AI personality named Nat. And this woman, which is a artificially generated woman with a clone voice, reads the news for people. So Dara, let's talk about that. I mean, if we think about it, what would these potentially impact the media, in addition to maybe having, these let me call them deep fake news presenters? What should we be cautious about in terms of these technologies in the workflows?
Yeah, well, I have a friend here who actually has great opinions on this field. Steve, why don't you tell us just a bit of your opinion on digital cloning?
The most exciting aspect of digital cloning, Dara, is the potential it holds for education and the preservation of knowledge. Imagine being able to interact with the greatest minds of our time, or any time for that matter, long after they're gone. It's like having a conversation with Aristotle himself, not just reading his works. This isn't about creating a mere echo or a recording. It's about capturing the essence, the thought process, the unique perspective of an individual. It's about creating a three-dimensional experience, not just a two-dimensional snapshot. But it's not just about the past. It's about the future, too. Digital clones could serve as mentors, guiding future generations, pushing them to think differently, to challenge the status quo, just as I have always strived to do. However, it's crucial to remember that with great power comes great responsibility. We must ensure that these digital clones are used ethically, respecting the values and wishes of those they represent. Now, Dara, I'm curious. How do you plan to ensure the authenticity of these digital clones on your platform, Delphi?
So that response was generated by our Steve Jobs clone on the Delphi platform. But to respond to your question, Steve, we think AI is best when it's augmenting people, not automating them. So you can imagine if everyone has an avatar or a digital clone, they're pretty much making their knowledge, their skill set, and time available to others when they're too busy or when they're no longer around. Steve, for example. And on Delphi, what we really focus on is to make sure that the responses are grounded on truth. We have citations for every response. Like that Steve Jobs response right there links back to something he has said in the past that would make him say something like this right now. And proof of truthfulness is important now, and it's only going to become more important. You talk to ChatGPT, it's kind of a black box. You don't really know where those answers are coming from. And fake news, in terms of its relationship to the media, fake news has always been a thing. But if you guys thought that 2016 was bad or 2020 was bad, 2024 is going to blow our minds. And it's a good thing and a bad thing. Bad thing because we don't know really what's going to happen, but it's a good thing because people are really going to have to question what they see on the internet. Usually people are very impressionable by like what they read on Twitter, what they see on YouTube, but fact checking and encouraging people to question what they see online is going to be incredibly important, because there's going to be a point on the internet where you're talking to someone, whether it's your email, texting, calling, on Twitter, and you won't know whether the person on the other side of the screen is a human or an AI. And so it's good to be aware of this so that you're looking out for it when you see something ridiculous.
So when I hear you, I mean, I'm thinking about the things that we talk about a lot at CNN, for example, which is all of this regarding, unregulated social media, unfettered growth, because we saw it in social media where it wasn't, there are no guardrails, right? And so I'm thinking, Rudy, specifically for you, the fake news, the conspiracy theories, the disinformation, all of the things that I start thinking about when I think deep fakes and what we are looking at. Is it time to look at industry-wide regulation to create guidelines and guardrails? And Rudy, who do you think should lead that process? Is it the industry itself? Is it government? I mean, are we too far down the rabbit hole to try to put the genie back in the bottle?
Yeah, I just want to highlight what Dara said. I thought it was a very good point of augmenting us as workers or us as people. I've gotten the opportunity to use Copilot. I'm a developer by trade, and I still get to do that a lot in my current role. And it's definitely, that's exactly how it does. It augments your ability to write code, to be more creative, to move faster, be more productive. Now, having said that, you mentioned social media and the internet. Now, it's an interesting comparison, because with social media, I don't know that, at least I'm not aware that we ever had these conversations prior to social media. being adopted, and it took several years for it to become prevalent in our everyday lives. And I don't know that the creators of social media, let's just pick on Facebook here, ever intended or imagined that it would be used for fake news and the things with Cambridge Analytica for elections and things like that. I don't think that was ever even dreamed of. So I think as far as what it's a time to look at regulations and create guidelines, absolutely. And I think that's already happening. I mean, just the fact that we're having this conversation right now, and this conversation is being repeated across the industry. Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI, and that's the platform that Microsoft partnered with to create all the Copilot on GitHub, where I work, which is for developers, and there's Copilot for all across the board of the Microsoft products. He's been going around and he's been identifying this like this is dangerous. We need regulation. This could potentially be dangerous. Let me say that. We need regulation. Let's put some regulations in place. And he's going around speaking to different leaders. Of basically, I know he's spoken to Congress, et cetera. He's gone over to Europe, and I think it's good that that's happened. I don't know that ever happened with social media. I think with social media, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know that they ever admitted it was dangerous. And I think it kind of went with a self-regulation model, which I don't think is the right move here. I think when we put regulations around AI, we really have to treat it as not just like a US government or Canada, et cetera, different countries' problem. It's really going to be a worldwide problem. It's something we need to decide, like, where do we want to go with this technology and what do we want to avoid? Those conversations need to be had, and I think they're starting to happen early enough. Hopefully we can move as fast as the technology is moving. So as far as being the genie back in the bottle, yeah, there's no going back from AI. I mean, we're here, we're not going to back up. I don't see that as an option. But again, to how do we solve it? This conversation, others having this conversation, coming up with ideas, deciding what do we want, what we don't want. It's a great first step. We've done it before. We've done it with chemical weapons. We've done it with nuclear weapons when we saw the dangers that those pose. I'm not a politician, so I'm not sure, but I think you put treaties in place and things like this. But the important first step is that we're recognizing the danger and we're having conversations about it, which is what we can do at our level, which is great.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And having said that, I'm going to go to Dara because I'm thinking now of just the concept of these avatars that you work with. And I know that you created this company because you wanted to have a connection with your ancestors, right? So how does that become, a game changer? And how does that impact the question of, values alignment? And I mean, trying to align how AGI will take over, for example, daily tasks, but also, the question of basic human values. Like, it sounds kind of scary, right? I mean, who's teaching human values? Whose values? Which would be the dominant culture or religion that would be taught to these various, AGI machines, or however you want to call them, programs? Is this not a tightrope?
I mean, it definitely is. And as you alluded to, what got me interested in the idea for Delphi, I never really had a mentor growing up. And, there are all these people you want access to, and they never respond to your DMs on Twitter or LinkedIn. So you end up having to read their books. And I was reading a book about my grandpa, and I found really useful wisdom in this book as I was working on my first startup as a solo founder. And so I created a clone of my grandpa using that book and kind of treated it as my own personal mentor. And if you look at the stats, the majority of people don't have a mentor. Private tutors are a luxury good that only the upper class can afford for their kids. But if you know Bloom's Two Sigma, the impact of having a tutor or a mentor improves one's learning ability by 2 standard deviations. So I think that's one of the best parts of AI, is that now everyone will have their own personal tutor that understands their strengths, that understands their weaknesses, that can teach them the gap between where they are and where they want to be. And so I think that's pretty incredible. In terms of alignment, it seems to me that the most likely future is not one where there's one AI instilled with one value set, but rather multiple AIs with multiple different beliefs. Just as humans, there are multiple humans with multiple beliefs. That's what makes us great. We're a diverse species. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's good to have representation of different beliefs and different points of view, obviously it gets a little risky when the wrong person creates their own AI and aligns it with their values. So I would be more afraid of the people who are creating the AIs and the people who have values that are not in alignment with the good of humanity.
So, I mean, before because I think you're bringing up something important. There are positives, right? We've all been talking about a lot more about the positives than we have about the negative. So what I want to do is kind of go around robin for the three of you before we continue. I mean, what do you each see as your kind of, here are the positives that I want to stress when I talk about AI or chat or VR? Why don't we start with you, Dr. Davis?
I think for our productivity, from a perspective, the positive focus is its ability to really enhance our productivity. That I saw a question in the chat about what about small agencies, even large agencies, or a newsroom. If you think about all the places where we are so spread really thin and we have too much to do in a day, that we can use AI to augment and delegate those tasks that are really time consuming, that we can be far more efficient by using AI to help us build what we do. And so not only making us more efficient, but also really bolstering our creativity. That if you're dealing with writer's block and you need something to shake it, use AI, or use AI to build out content. And we heard about Copilot. Oh my goodness. I saw that in use recently by Frank Shaw from Microsoft, where he was showing us, it's like, and he even said, I'm a great writer, but I'm not really good at PowerPoint. You can ask Copilot to turn your paper, your white paper, your blog, your academic paper into a PowerPoint presentation, and boom, it happens so very quickly. So from an efficiency perspective, that's an amazing thing. And the other piece that I would add is that I've worked, a lot of my research has been working with the disability community. And I believe that AI has the ability to really give people who may have deficits in certain spaces, it has a way to sort of fill in that gap or strengthen what they don't have. Where if you have somebody, as an example, who's got a brilliant mind, but isn't able to speak, or speaks differently, or reads differently, people with dyslexia who have trouble spelling or writing, that AI can really enhance the work that they do.
So we're going to get back to you on that, so you can tell us a little bit more about that, because that's fascinating. I'm going to go to Rudy. Rudy, tell me if you could think about, kind of give me your quick, here's the big positive, right? When you have to talk about it, what do you tell people?
Well, as a developer and engineer, I like to build things, and that's what I've been doing throughout my career. And I've been around long enough to see the PC revolution, web revolution, and mobile, and now AI coming through. And there was fears in all these stages, but overall, if you take the good with the bad, it was generally good. So I think I'm really excited to see the new industries, the creative ways that engineers and even people who are not engineers, the things that they can build now that they are the barriers to being a developer are kind of like lowered. So I'm really excited to see the things that are going to be built, the new industries that'll pop up, the improvements we'll make to existing technologies. That's a really positive thing that I'm really excited about.
Thank you. And let me go to Dara. Dara, you've mentioned several, but tell me, which ones would you say are that big? Obviously for you, connecting to your grandfather, to me, that's fascinating, but I'm sure there's more.
I have so many. I'm an optimist by trade. You kind of have to be as a founder, but I'll list a few. Definitely the scaled mentorship. Like, imagine a kid who grows up in a low-income family, and he now has the ability to learn from the greatest minds in the world and have that accountability and be able to really grow on his own. The second is discovery of secrets. So this isn't something that GPT-4 or ChatGPT can necessarily do right now, but some of you may have seen Elon Musk announced his new AI company with a goal to discover the secrets of the universe. Today, yeah.
Today was the announcement. That was the big news that right before we got onto this chat. And I'm thinking, I hope CNN is already doing this story.
It's big news, but this is already happening in some biotech startups, like using AI to find cures to diseases that were previously uncurable, using AI to discover secrets in physics. I think that's really, really exciting. And then lastly, this is less obvious. A lot of people are afraid of job loss, but if you think about the second order effects of companies becoming more efficient and more productive, it most likely will mean that the goods that they produce will also be cheaper, meaning that more people can afford them, meaning that the masses will be able to afford more goods and have more money to save, which I think will have good consequences after that.
Fascinating. Okay, so let's continue here. I know that Rudy, you talked about, the things in the being in the bottle. We talked now about the positives. Dara, you've shared some of the issues of your avatars. I want to go back a little bit to Dr. Davis and the question of the people who have physical disabilities, who have challenges in their life, and how these technologies can help to make their lives better and perhaps even open a new world for them. I'm thinking of virtual reality. I see what does that do for somebody that can't move, that's sitting in a wheelchair? What does that give that person in terms of life quality, right?
Absolutely. And there's a whole spectrum, an answer to that can go from something as simple as even not with the disability community specifically, but what we see are often with aging people who live in isolation, that they can turn to AI. It's interesting that there are some that are turning to AI for companionship. You can talk to the AI. It's almost, we've seen this in dystopian movies, but we're also seeing where it can really make a difference. And it can also provide people the opportunity, in the work that I did with the disability community. As an example, I worked with a young man who was very disabled with cerebral palsy, wheelchair bound. It was very difficult to understand his speech because of his palsy, but you could also tell the man was brilliant. He was witty, he was charming, he was a lovely human being. He just couldn't get it out. And in working in virtual reality and virtual worlds, he got to choose an avatar that represented a body that was unlike his. And one of the things that when we went to visit one of the studios of one of the companies that we were working with, we put the hand controller from the VR headset on his foot and asked if he could kick his foot, would his avatar wave, because he couldn't hold a hand controller. He put it on his foot, he started kicking, and we're looking at the big screen that was linked to his headset, and we watched his avatar wave his arm. And this young man who was never in his life able to do that, watched what he saw as his surrogate waving by the function of his own body. Wow. And I still get goosebumps at his
concept
response.
of agency, right? Of being able to have agency of yourself, right, is magnificent.
And imagine the people from the deaf community.
Of course. No, it's magnificent. Yeah. And when I hear all of this and I think about that, I was at my mother, and I'm going to do a little aside here. I was at my mother-in-law's house. She's 85 years old, lives in Fort Myers, with my father-in-law, who is almost 90. And the funniest thing happened. I get there with lunch. This was last weekend. And she was talking to Alexa. She spends all day long asking Alexa questions. And her big discovery was that she had asked Alexa to say, "Who is Cynthia Hudson?" And sure enough, she went, "Alexa." And I started laughing because I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to be an old lady someday talking to a bot just to keep me entertained while my father-in-law is watching Western movies. Okay, I'm off the rails, but I'm going to come back because it's all related. Rudy, let's talk about this, because I think also about people who rely on the devices, and that leads me to some of the things that scare me, right? So one of those is that I had read that in the testing phases of ChatGPT, the bot had figured out how to lie and cheat to get around the guardrails on tasks, such as defeating a CAPTCHA test. Remember the CAPTCHA test, which is what we've all used to ensure that we're not a robot. or describing how to make illegal substances. And frankly, I keep getting those nightmares that you mentioned earlier about the Terminator and the rise of the machines. But in the same way that that we're raising, ways to fix some of these issues, and the creators are working on that, I think it begs a really important question, right? What happens when the bad guys create the bots to interfere with all of the wonderful work and all of the positives that we're talking about, that Dara has mentioned, that you, Donna, have mentioned, that Rudy has mentioned? What goes after that? Rudy.
Yeah, I think what you're
along with Dara.
I think what you're mentioning there is something known as emergent abilities, and
Mhm.
that's when the system kind of does things that it wasn't you weren't expecting. It's kind of like the black box scenario. It's also called. The example you highlighted, it's something that did happen. It was out in the press. Even more recently, OpenAI released several plugins, and one of them was one that connected OpenAI to the internet. This had some unexpected side effects in the way that people were using it. So OpenAI just went ahead and kind of turned it off for everybody because of this. And it's kind of like learn as we go. There's a lot of research and testing and thought that goes into place before these abilities are released out into the the greater community. But that is something the people working on this are aware of and do their best to mitigate.
So that means that the companies that have good intentions are working on guardrails, right? They're thinking about, oh my goodness, here is the potential for danger. I mean, what else can be done to stop some of these things? Should there be a place of sharing of this knowledge? I mean, it's kind of scary that we have to find out that they could cheat and lie because somebody was able to kind of put it out there. But it wasn't common knowledge. It's not something that comes out as, let's all share this information. Or are there places? I mean, Rudy, when you think about it, how do we stop it before it happens?
So currently there are filters in place to prevent users from asking questions, kind of like we talked about chemical bombs. How do you make a chemical bomb? Like it won't respond to that. There's certain guardrails that are in place. There's research teams thinking about and taking steps to prevent these things and try to think and mitigate these risks before they happen. You're not going to get them all, right? Obviously, because it's hard to think about everything that's possible, but it's something that's carefully looked at. I think one of the things people are really concerned with is like autonomy, which is where the system kind of realizes what it is and kind of participates in its own development to make itself better. And then that's when we lose control. But right. The systems, the way they work today, are just not capable of this. I think that's a lot of the sci-fi movies we've been watching throughout the years kind of led us there. We're getting closer to that, like I mentioned earlier, but I don't think we're quite there yet. And again, I'm refreshed and encouraged that these conversations like the one we're having today is happening across the board, and we're recognizing and approaching this as cautious as we can.
Okay, well, listen, I think it's just so interesting. And, I think about this, and I think about a world in which all these new fantastic tools really bring all those innovations, and they truly do create, a positive change in the world. And I hear you all, and it makes me so optimistic. And then I think, well, maybe I'm being just unwittingly terrified, and it's just too much, or I'm too exaggerated on this. But, the truth of the matter is that, I'd love for you each to describe the future. Like, what does the future look like to you in a world of AI, and where we've learned to use these tools in a way that just changes life for the better? So let's see, Dara, why don't you start?
Sure. I'll start with one pessimistic thing, since I've been optimistic this entire time, and it's in response to something that Donna said. So I think AI companionship is awesome because a lot of people need that kind of companionship, and it's good for mental health. What scares me on the companionship side is, we're already seeing kind of a population decline. There are a lot of single people who are choosing not to have kids, and you are seeing the killer use case in AI being AI girlfriends. If you guys have seen Blade Runner 2049, the main character has that AI wife, and I'm afraid of a future where people prefer to have an AI partner rather than a real partner where they can have kids and contribute to population. So that's the pessimistic fear. The optimistic point of view is I think that jobs that people never really wanted to do growing up are not going to be jobs that people will do. Like, people will really be able to go after their dreams and aspirations. If you have a goal, the time it takes to test out that goal and, sell it to people or learn the skills yourself are going to be there. So I think people are just going to be a lot happier. If you know Maslow's hierarchy, there's self-actualization at the top of it. And I think AI will help us self-actualize and learn, what do I want to do? How can I do it? And what's the path to get there? And that's exciting.
Your mic is
Cynthia.
off.
Did I mute myself? There we go. Sorry about that. Well, we've had only one snafu. Here we go. I hear you, and I think to myself, those ideas just sound wonderful. And at the same time, I do get scared about the issue of loneliness and human connection. So that becomes a big question. What about you, Dr. Davis?
I think Dara just really nailed it. I think that I've been studying social capital and virtual reality, for almost 16 years. And it allows us to find a connection that too often our physical world has eliminated. And I think AI there's the promise and peril. And I think that if we start with that peril, I think that we have to think about the ethics of it. We have to think about our own personal responsibility. When it goes into the wild, we're the ones it learns from. It learns from the questions we ask. It learns from our prompts. It learns from what we do. So what is our accountability and our responsibility in that? And there are organizations like IEEE, which is the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, who has a really wonderful team of people that are studying the ethics of AI and immersive technologies and what we need to be thinking about. And I think there's really great people thinking about it. I think we also need to be thinking about not only our role in it, but that how do we use it and companies use it responsibly? What role will the government play in putting those guardrails in place? But with that in mind, if we're using it responsibly, right. And we have to also find a way to get back to those personal connections, which goes back to the very first thing I talked about. Public relations is about relationships. So how do we find ways to maintain healthy personal relationships and connections? We're going to have to do that and use AI to supplement what we do as healthy human beings.
So I see the need for a lot of mental health professionals who can understand how this works, frankly. We talk about new jobs. Let's talk about that as well.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go to Rudy. What do you think? I mean, if you had that 1 second about the future, and then I'm going to get into some of the questions of our guests. Rudy?
Yeah, I'll be brief to give some time for Q&A. But I think AI is a tool, just like a hammer is a tool. But you can use a hammer for violent acts, and you can also use it to create shelters for people, to create art, and do lots of great things. And I'm hopeful that people will do the right thing and use this additional time gained through improvements in productivity and this weapon this tool to be more creative, to do good, to come up with cures to diseases like we've talked about, solve some of those problems, and hopefully reduce or eliminate suffering.
Well, I certainly hope so. And honestly, this is so fascinating. We have some really great questions, so I'm going to go to those. But at the same time, I also wanted to mention that I never thought I would be in a panel with Steve Jobs. So the idea that after all these years, and he passed away before I could get to him. Thank you, Dara, for including him. And actually to see Wayne at the beginning was fascinating as well. Now, I want to get to some of these very good questions. I'll start with from Maria Alejandra. Let me see how I can. You want me to do the one on the screen? I guess so. Okay. So we're going to go with Christina Armand's question. Public relations agencies will be using AI to fulfill many of their tasks. Large agencies will likely have the resources to map out policies and institutionalize the use of AI. And what is your advice for smaller agencies and practitioners? I'm going to throw that at Dr. Davis.
Sure. I think that your question is really valid and important. And the large agencies are already doing that, a lot of that. I think for small agencies, it's going to be important to still map out policies. So how is your agency going to use it? And look at what the tools are. One of the things also that I keep hearing as a common theme when I'm doing my interviews is billable hours. So when you think about as a small agency, how important billable hours are, and if AI is going to make us more efficient, it's also going to ultimately impact our billable hours. So it's going to be really important to also have a really strong relationship with your clients so that you understand what their expectations are, that you understand that attribution thing. You know, it's like, how are you using AI? And you make sure that your clients know how you're using AI, and that you absolutely have to embrace it. When somebody said, AI is not going to replace jobs in the public relations business, it's going to, people who don't understand how to use AI are going to be the ones that are going to lose their jobs. So learn it, understand it, learn how to harness it, put your guardrails in place, but it can absolutely make you more productive and efficient. And then just make sure that you stay in really good contact with your clients so that they know how you're using it for their work.
That's great. You know, it's interesting because I know that the next question is going to be another interesting one, particularly because it has to do with, you know, this is the Hispanic PR Association. And when we deal with very specific communications, you know, we're dealing with people that have cultural differences, that have, you know, an affinity perhaps for cultural norms or even language. So I guess this question is really great from Raquel. As AI becomes more mainstream, how do we ensure that we are accounting for potential bias stemming from data sets that only recognize the dominant pattern and don't consider cultural differences that are important in communications? Good question. Okay, so I think I'm going to throw that at Rudy.
Boy, oh boy, that is a good question. Yeah, these models are trained from a lot of the information that's out there on the internet as well as other sources. So it's a pretty fair representation of the overall, but I'm sure a lot of people are being left out of that conversation. But if we go down the path of making this a problem that's recognized globally, just to everybody as a species, the leaders across the world, I think that opens up the opportunities to make sure that there is no bias. And that is definitely one of the things that should be considered as regulations, rules. I mentioned us deciding what we want and don't want. This is definitely one of these things that should be in the want column. We wanted to respect cultural diversities and recognize that there's differences amongst cultures, peoples, age groups, genders, et cetera, et cetera. So,
I mean, even Spanish, it's like, okay, if you're talking to somebody in Miami, it might be a little different than if you were talking to somebody in LA where I was born, right? So you don't know. Very interesting. Okay, so then we're going to go to Ingrid Vega's question. What AI-related guardrails are being put into place to prevent the spread of fake news for the upcoming election? Obviously, this is one that's very close to my interest. And how can internet users vet where the news is coming from? And Dara, you had mentioned that people needed to be able to, you know, look and question what they were seeing. And Rudy also mentioned kind of, look, this is going to be really an issue going forward with regards to how these things are created. So let's start with Dara, and I'll let Rudy chime in. And I actually think all three of you should respond to this as well, because I think all communications people who are studying journalism are very worried about this. So go ahead, Dara. Let's start with you.
Yeah, so I think there are already companies being built around this problem. One of them is GPT-0. It's a company that can identify AI-generated text. I know a couple are working on being able to determine whether something was developed by Stable Diffusion, which is like the image generator, and then being able to determine whether something is a deep fake or not. So I think there will be technical solutions around this, but I just think the mindset for whether to believe something or not is the same mindset that it's always been, like understand the source and the incentives of that source, and then make your own conclusions from there.
Rudy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think we learned a lot of lessons with what we've just been through with social media in the last few elections that Dara mentioned. I completely agree with him that it gets amplified with this new tool. I think we'll take the lessons that we learned from social media and carry those forward. And as the evidence I can see from the builders of these technology, I'm not a data scientist, so I'm not really in this field. I'm a user just like anybody else. I mean, I'm in technology, so I'm a little bit closer to the problem. But as far as I can tell, the people that I've heard speaking, if we were to take them at their word, they are aware of this. They are aware of this problem, and they are doing their best to try to prevent that from happening. So I find that very encouraging. It's not like, just put it out there and let's see what happens. At least something is being done. The next election coming up is a very important one, just as they all are. So I'm very interested to see what we will do with that.
Okay, and Dr. Davis, any other thing you'd like to add to the question about fake news and how do we spread it? How do we stop people from falling for it?
At the end of the day, it's about media literacy. It's really, they have to understand what they're consuming and to what effect. And people have to be able to take the interest in it and pop their own filter bubbles and try to look at things through a more diverse and broad lens, and try to understand where has that news come from. And when you're on social, none of those regulations are in place. So the troll farms have done a really brilliant job of manipulating us through our emotions. So it's like, how do you talk to those people who aren't likely to care about what you say because they are stuck in the way they're looking at things? And that's a real problem in our culture right now. So
yeah, I mean, we've all already chosen a side and only want to believe what somebody from that side is telling. I mean, it's really a vacuum, and you're speaking to people within a vacuum.
Right. So
if you don't mind, I'm very curious what you think. If you don't mind.
So this is one of those things where I think it's very concerning, particularly with the region that I cover in terms of Latin America and obviously the US, where I think we saw it so well done, but it's been well done in other countries as well. And so what we have found is that everyone is in their silo, and they don't want to believe what the other side is saying. And the other part of that is just how very well done and even what scares me more is when I see the really bad fakes, and I'm like, how does anybody believe this? But those are the ones that scare me because I think it really it's a feeder into what you want to hear, and so it gets more outrageous and more outrageous. And I think that it has the potential for a lot of danger. We saw that during the pandemic. We believe that many people that could have been perhaps saved and or avoided going through some of the issues of COVID, perhaps could have had a better outcome had they not been such easy victims for some of the misinformation on all sides, by the way, of what this was. And so that, I think, became a kind of a focus for us as to, this is something serious that we need to take very seriously. And we try to be very careful about presenting things with attribution, explaining where it was, giving it a locator, showing, and when we see fakes that people are sharing and become viral, we actually say, by the way, many of you may have seen something like this. Be careful, because here's what the real video looked like, right? Which is interesting when you find those online. So I think that this is going to be a process where all of us are learning and all of us are finding ways to come back with the right response, so as to help people have faith, because I think this is a problem of lost faith in traditional media and in the information that we present. And so it's really on us to win back people with being just really solid journalists. And that is where I try to push every day. Okay, so I'm going to go to the last question, and I can't believe we're right on time. And I know, Dr. Davis, you have to go. So, I want to get to you because this is about online courses. Are there online courses that you recommend for people to learn Master Chat or Master Chat GPT?
There's a number of sources that are popping up now that are classes that if you, and I don't have them right in front of me, but I am more than happy to respond with, I just put, oops, that's not the right chat. Let me put my email address. I can't put my email address in here, hold on. But I'm happy to respond, dzdavis@uoregon.edu. I've got a number of them that I could pull up and share with you, but there's a lot of them coming out through LinkedIn Learning and other organizations that are doing training in AI and ChatGPT. And of course, you can certainly always apply to our new master's program where you'll learn about all of those things.
Great. Thank you very much. And I want to go and tell everyone, honestly, that this has been just such a pleasure to work with all of you and to really have a discussion that I honestly think is so prescient. We're all worried about this. We're all thinking about it. We're all questioning it, wondering what the future is going to be like. And I wanted to thank HPRA as well as Wayne Anderson from Manderson PR for having put together this incredible panel. I'm so honored to be able to have had a chance to moderate with such brilliant talent and creators and people that are helping us to just think in a different way with regards to this. And I'd like to go ahead and pass it to Wayne, who is now not the clone, it's the real Wayne. So I'm going to go ahead and thank everyone for joining us and let Wayne close out, because I think, Wayne, you came up with this. You had these brilliant ideas about speaking to Dara and getting Steve Jobs to talk about Aristotle. I mean, how incredible was that? So go ahead, Wayne.
Thank you. So, wow, I thought this was terrific. And I just want to say good afternoon to everyone. As Cynthia mentioned, my name is Wayne Anderson, and I'm the president-elect of the HPRA Miami chapter. It's been a delight, and I'm so excited that so many people tuned in to this virtual panel discussion on AI chatbots, the challenges and the opportunities for the communications industry. I also want to just start off by thanking the panelists for their insights. And again, Cynthia, thank you, the panel moderator, and clearly someone I claim as a friend. Dr. Donna Davis, thank you. Rudy Sarmento, thank you. Dar Lajvardian, thank you. You guys are at the forefront of AI and VR and chatbots, and you're the highlight of what took place here today. Your insights were invaluable, and I hope that everyone participating and listening in also will walk away with the same sense. I'd also like to thank the HPRA Executive Board for their hard work and assistance in assembling this virtual panel. It was a lot of work, and on both ends, from the panel members who really chimed in and gave their time, and obviously on our end as well, putting this all together. This has been just an excellent opportunity to have a discussion about something I think that's so relevant. So, I mean, again, look, today we broached a subject that is literally at its genesis. We learned from experts about the disruptiveness of AI, VR, and chatbots. And I think we've kind of walked away with a better sense or a greater sense of their impact and how it will impact traditional media and communications, and how each platform will actually revolutionize our lives as we go forward. We talked a little bit about the ethical implications of these new technologies, and clearly I think as much as there is the dark side of this, there's going to be a positive benefit to these new platform features. I'm excited to see how these technologies develop as we go forward. I'm grateful. I've had a wonderful opportunity and a pleasurable time spending with each of you in planning this over the past couple of weeks. So I just want to say thank you again. This concludes our panel discussion. Thanks to everyone that joined in and participated.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great day.
You too.